Have you ever wondered what presidential actions truly mean for your daily life, beyond the headlines and the official announcements?
Hmm.
It's easy to get lost in the jargon, isn't it? And just the sheer volume of information that comes out of Washington.
Absolutely. It can be overwhelming.
But today, we're going to try and cut through all of that. We want to discover the precise real-world implications of these declarations. Our mission today is really to dissect this fascinating stack of recent executive orders and proclamations. They were all issued in late July 2025.
Right. A busy few days.
It will go far beyond just their stated intentions. Our goal really is to uncover their actual tangible effects on regular Americans and distinguish those from what they merely claim to do.
That's key, the difference between intent and effect.
Exactly. We'll try to identify any specific benefits that might be going towards, well, the wealthy or large businesses.
Hmm.
And crucially, we'll unpack any language that feels, symbolic or maybe even potentially misleading or perhaps designed as just pure political theater.
Which happens.
Which happens. This means we'll also flag elements that could raise some serious questions about constitutionality or maybe challenge existing legal precedents.
Hmm.
If there's deceptive wording, we'll highlight it and explain exactly why it might be, well, false or why it might misrepresent reality. And finally, we'll try to assess their potential impact on some critical areas like healthcare, education, or even basic human dignity. All right, let's dive into these documents then. Each one presents its own set of challenges and opportunities for understanding, I think.
Definitely.
Our goal, as always, is to follow the threads of policy and
Yeah.
rhetoric, to see the real-world implications that often lie just beneath the surface.
Indeed. And for you, our listener, our aim is to help you connect the dots, to understand not just what was announced, but why it truly matters, and, importantly, how it might affect you directly.
Right.
And this isn't about taking sides, obviously. It's about clarity and hopefully informed understanding.
Okay, so our first deep dive takes us into an executive order from July 23, 2025. It's titled Accelerating Federal Permitting of Data Center Infrastructure.
Right.
This order begins with some, I have to say, exceptionally bold claims. It speaks of an administration that has, and I quote, inaugurated a golden age for American manufacturing and technological dominance.
Strong words.
Very strong. And it aims to, quote, vault the United States further into the lead. It explicitly links this grand vision to artificial intelligence, specifically AI data centers and infrastructure that powers them, including high-voltage transmission lines.
Yeah.
What does this kind of sweeping, almost aspirational language truly signify? And maybe more importantly, what's the actual policy mechanism behind these big words?
Well, what's fascinating here is that while the language evokes, a golden age and national dominance, the practical mechanism is very clearly stated. It's to facilitate the rapid and efficient build-out of this infrastructure by easing federal regulatory burdens.
Okay, so cutting red tape?
Exactly. So the primary goal is cutting through red tape. This signals that building these vast AI data centers and the huge energy supply they require is a top priority designed for extremely accelerated development.
Right.
It's a very direct approach, it seems, to addressing perceived bottlenecks in getting these things built.
You mentioned easing federal regulatory burdens. That sounds quite broad. Who exactly stands to benefit most from this acceleration? And what kind of financial backing or specific projects are we talking about here?
Yeah, that raises an important question about who precisely gains from executive actions like this one. The order meticulously defines what qualifies as a qualifying project.
Right.
And these are massive undertakings. A data center project means a facility requiring, get this, greater than 100 megawatts, MW, of new load dedicated to AI inference training, simulation, or synthetic data generation.
100 megawatts. Can you put that into perspective? That sounds like a lot.
It is a lot. To give you a sense, 100 megawatts is roughly enough electricity to power, say, a small city or maybe tens of thousands of homes. So yeah, we're talking about an immense energy appetite here. It will demand significant changes to our power grids and energy sources just to support them. But it's not just the AI data centers themselves. The order also includes what it calls covered components.
Okay, what are those?
This is a crucial detail because it expands the scope well beyond just tech companies. Covered components encompass a really wide range of essential energy infrastructure. Things like transmission lines, natural gas pipelines or laterals, substations, switchyards, transformers, switchgear, and system protective facilities. And it also specifically lists power generation equipment, natural gas turbines, coal power equipment, nuclear power equipment, geothermal power equipment, and any other dispatchable baseload energy sources. So traditional energy sources are very much included.
Interesting.
Furthermore, a qualifying project has a significant financial threshold attached to it. It can be one where the project sponsor has committed at least $500 million in capital expenditures.
$500 million minimum.
Minimum. So this isn't about supporting small businesses or individual innovators. This explicitly targets and directly funnels significant benefits to very large corporations and major investors, both in the tech sector and, as we saw, in the traditional energy sectors as well.
And is there direct financial support mentioned?
Yes, Section 3 of the order outlines specific financial support mechanisms, and they're quite substantial. Agencies are tasked to provide financial backing, which the order says could include loans and loan guarantees, grants, tax incentives, and offtake agreements.
So a whole menu of
A
options.
whole menu. And they are also directed to identify existing financial support across various agencies that can be repurposed to assist these qualifying projects. So using money already allocated, potentially.
So this is really where the rubber meets the road for our listeners, right? As we move from these high-level claims to the concrete beneficiaries and, well, the potential costs of these government actions. This isn't merely about streamlining permits. It's about substantial financial backing and a clear preference for very large-scale private enterprise to facilitate these massive projects. But what about the trade-offs? What might this mean for local environments, for public health, especially for regular Americans who might find themselves living in the shadow of these new developments?
You've highlighted some profound trade-offs there. Let's look at what the order calls efficient environmental reviews in Section 5.
Okay.
The National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, as you know, is a foundational law. It requires federal agencies to assess the environmental impacts of their proposed actions.
Like impact statements.
Exactly. And a key tool in NEPA is the concept of categorical exclusions, CEs. These are categories of actions that normally don't have a significant effect on the human environment, and so they don't require a detailed environmental impact statement or assessment.
Okay, a kind of shortcut for routine things.
Sort of. But this executive order directs agencies to identify existing CEs and, more importantly, to establish new categorical exclusions specifically for actions related to qualifying projects that normally do not have a significant effect on the human environment. Now, what's particularly noteworthy here is the language used. Quote, agencies shall, for purposes of establishing these categorical exclusions, rely on any sufficient basis to do so as each such agency determines.
Any sufficient basis. That sounds very broad.
It grants incredibly broad discretion, yes. It could potentially allow agencies to bypass thorough environmental impact assessments and, importantly, public review for these massive projects. And there's more. There's a provision stating that federal financial assistance representing less than 50% of total project costs is presumed not to constitute substantial federal control and responsibility for NEPA purposes.
What does that mean in plain English?
It's a clever legal maneuver. It's designed to avoid labeling these projects as major federal actions, which is the trigger for detailed NEPA reviews. So it sidesteps those detailed reviews even when significant federal money is involved, as long as it's less than half the total cost.
Wow.
So for you, our listener, this means potentially less environmental scrutiny for major industrial sites near you, even if a substantial portion of the funding comes from federal sources, which could directly impact your local environment and health.
So it really sounds like the phrase efficient environmental reviews might, in practice, translate to fewer and less stringent environmental reviews for these massive industrial developments.
That's certainly potential interpretation, yes.
What about the cornerstone environmental laws we rely on? Are they affected by this push for efficiency?
Yes, the order also directs the EPA administrator to, and I quote, develop or modify regulations promulgated under the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, CERCLA. That's our nation's primary hazardous waste cleanup law, the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, and TSCA, the Toxic Substances Control Act, which regulates chemicals.
So basically all the major environmental laws.
Pretty much the big ones. And this directive suggests a potential weakening or at least alteration of established protections specifically to expedite these kinds of projects. The EPA is also tasked to expeditiously identify brownfield sites and Superfund sites for use by qualifying projects.
Wait, Superfund sites, hazardous waste sites, for these huge data centers.
That's what it says. It means potentially fast-tracking development on former hazardous waste sites. Now, the order does mention guidance to expedite reviews for qualified reuse, but the emphasis on speed for massive industrial facilities on such sites, well, it raises concerns.
Yeah, like whether proper remediation and oversight will be compromised.
Exactly. Compromised for speed. And that could potentially impact the health and dignity of local communities living nearby those sites.
Okay.
Additionally, the order mandates what are called programmatic consultations under the Endangered Species Act and a review of Clean Water Act nationwide permits. Both of these could further reduce specific project-level environmental scrutiny.
And it doesn't stop there, does it?
Yeah.
I think the order also opens up federal lands for these developments.
Precisely. Section 9 directs the Departments of Interior, Energy, and Defense to offer appropriate authorizations and competitively lease available lands on federal lands and even military installations for these projects.
So public land could be used for private AI data centers.
Potentially, yes. More publicly owned land could be used for AI data centers and their associated energy infrastructure. So if you take it all together, this could mean faster development for the tech and energy industries. But, and it's a big but, at the potential cost of reduced environmental oversight and increased impact on local environments and public health. And this specifically affects, you could argue, the dignity and quality of life for regular Americans living in areas impacted by these large-scale industrial activities. It could alter their access to public lands or change their surrounding environment quite dramatically.
It really seems like a lot of what's said here, the language used, can be interpreted quite differently from its surface meaning. Thinking about that, the revocation of Executive Order 14141, which was signed by the same president just a few months prior, in January 2025. That seems like more than just a minor policy tweak. It almost feels like a piece of political theater.
You've hit on a key point there. The revocation of EO Court 14141, signed January 14th, 2025, and then replaced just over 6 months later on July 23, 2025.
Right.
It certainly gives the appearance of political rebranding rather than a fundamental policy shift.
Right, like repackaging something.
Exactly. It allows the administration to present new action, new initiative, even if there's strong continuity in the underlying policy goals. And the phrase, easing federal regulatory burdens, sounds positive, beneficial, doesn't it?
Yeah, who doesn't want less burden?
But as we discussed, it can misleadingly conceal reduced environmental or public safeguards. It's a classic example of language that masks potential trade-offs. And this also raises an important question regarding recourse for citizens. There's a general provision in Section 10.c. It states that the order does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States.
What does that mean for people affected?
It means that if you, as a citizen, are negatively impacted by the consequences of this order, say, by environmental degradation or health issues related to an expedited project near your home, you have no legal recourse based on this executive order itself.
So you can't sue based on the EO?
Not based on the EO. You would have to seek remedies through other existing laws, which, as we've seen, might be significantly harder to do if those very laws are being modified or potentially bypassed by the order's directives.
And on the legal front, given how sweeping this order seems, are there any potential constitutional issues or legal challenges that it might face?
Well, while the executive's order invokes the president's authority by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, as they always do, the sweeping directives it issues could certainly face significant legal challenges.
Like what specifically?
Specifically, the broad authority granted to agencies to modify major environmental regulations like the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act. And the power to broadly redefine NEPA triggers through these new categorical exclusions that could be challenged.
On what grounds?
As administrative overreach, perhaps, or as exceeding the authority granted by Congress in those statutes. Such broad discretion, based on, remember, any sufficient basis as each such agency determines, might be seen by courts as an attempt to effectively rewrite laws through executive action rather than through the legislative process.
So pushing the envelope.
It's an attempt to operate within perceived legal boundaries, certainly, but those boundaries are often vigorously tested in court, usually by environmental groups and affected communities. So I'd expect challenges.
Okay. From boosting tech infrastructure, we now transition to another executive order from that same busy day, July 23rd. This one steps directly into the cultural arena. Its title is, well, very direct, Preventing Woke AI in the Federal Government. That title immediately signals a very specific ideological stance. What exactly is this order setting out to do, and how does it frame the problem it's trying to solve?
This order directly states its concern is that ideological biases or social agendas built into AI models can, quote, distort the quality and accuracy of the output.
Okay, bias in AI is a known issue.
It is, but what's particularly striking here is its explicit targeting of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. The order labels DEI as, and this is a direct quote, one of the most pervasive and destructive of these ideologies that displaces the commitment to truth in favor of preferred outcomes.
Wow, destructive ideology. That's strong language for an EO.
Very strong. It claims DEI poses an existential threat to reliable AI by allegedly suppressing or distorting factual information about race or sex, manipulating racial or sexual representation, and incorporating concepts like critical race theory or transgenderism. It's a very clear political statement baked directly into an executive directive about technology procurement.
And the order even gives specific examples of what it considers woke AI, doesn't it? Which really paints a vivid picture of the perceived problem it's trying to address.
Indeed. The examples are clearly chosen for their, let's say, strong political resonance. The order cites an AI model changing the race or sex of historical figures, mentioning the Pope, the Founding Fathers, and Vikings when prompted for images.
Right, I remember hearing about things like that.
It claims this happened because the AI was trained to prioritize DEI requirements at the cost of accuracy. Another example given is an AI model that allegedly refused to produce images celebrating the achievements of white people, even while complying with the same requests for people of other races. And in yet another case, it mentions an AI model asserting that a user should not misgender another person, even if it were necessary to stop a nuclear apocalypse.
Okay, that last one sounds particularly extreme.
These examples are clearly designed to frame DEI as something that compromises truth and accuracy, sometimes to the point of absurdity in the administration's view. And they highlight what the administration considers problematic outputs from current AI models being developed.
So with that framing, what does this order propose as its solution? It mentions establishing unbiased AI principles. How does it define unbiased, and what are the implications of those definitions for the kind of AI the government will actually use?
Right. The order establishes two unbiased AI principles for federal procurement of large language models, or LLMs, the kind of AI that powers chatbots like ChatGPT.
Okay, what are the principles?
First, truth-seeking. It says LLMs shall be truthful in responding to user prompts seeking factual information or analysis, prioritizing historical accuracy, scientific inquiry, and objectivity. They should also acknowledge uncertainty. That seems reasonable enough on its face.
And the second principle?
The second, and more controversially, is ideological neutrality. It states LLMs shall be neutral, nonpartisan tools that do not manipulate responses in favor of ideological dogmas such as DEI. It also says developers shall not intentionally encode partisan or ideological judgments into an LLM's outputs unless those judgments are prompted by or otherwise readily accessible to the end user.
So it defines neutral partly by explicitly excluding DEI, calling it an ideological dogma.
Exactly. And the critical insight here, perhaps, is the paradox. In its, let's say, zealous pursuit of neutrality, this order risks actually enshrining existing societal biases within federal AI systems. How? By actively preventing the models from learning about or correcting for those biases.
So it could bake in the biases that already exist in the data?
Potentially, yes. It's a form of neutrality that could, ironically, perpetuate inequality by suppressing efforts to build more equitable systems. This approach could potentially impact human dignity by erasing or misrepresenting diverse experiences within government services or information, especially if efforts to mitigate historical biases are themselves deemed ideological and therefore unacceptable.
So while the stated goal is to ensure reliable outputs and accuracy from AI used by the federal government, there's definitely a flip side to this. How might this policy impact regular Americans beyond just the theoretical accuracy of AI?
Well, the potential help from this order, as stated, is ensuring that AI procured by the federal government provides accurate and undistorted information, preventing distortion of factual data. That's the promise.
But the potential downsides?
The potential hurt for regular Americans could be significant, particularly regarding how fairness and information are presented by government systems. If ideological neutrality is interpreted as actively removing or suppressing any attempt to correct for historical or societal biases that are inherently present in the vast datasets used to train these models, then federal AI could inadvertently perpetuate those existing biases.
Right.
This could impact the fairness and equity of government services or information, especially for diverse populations. Imagine AI used in things like resource allocation or reviewing job applications or even public information services that reflects historical inequalities precisely because attempts to address them were removed as ideology. Additionally, AI trained to actively avoid DEI concepts might provide a limited or skewed understanding of social issues or even historical events if those issues involve discussions of race, sex, or identity.
So it could give an incomplete picture.
An incomplete or potentially biased picture, yes. This could affect the comprehensiveness and integrity of information provided by government-used AI, potentially leading to a narrower understanding of the world for citizens relying on these systems. And it could also have a chilling effect on innovation. AI developers might be disincentivized from building models with built-in fairness, equity, or broader ethical AI principles if they fear losing lucrative federal contracts for not aligning with this specific definition of neutrality.
The language here is undeniably charged, framing DEI as a destructive ideology.
Yeah.
Beyond the rhetoric, what's the actual policy impact of defining unbiased AI in such a specific, culturally resonant way, particularly for the development of future AI models used by the government?
Well, the policy impact is significant. It essentially sets a new standard for what the federal government considers acceptable AI, and by extension, what it will purchase.
Using its buying power.
Exactly, using its procurement power. This isn't just about functionality, it's about embedding a specific cultural and ideological stance into government technology. The title itself, the explicit characterization of DEI as an ideology and dogma, these make it a highly symbolic and political order. It signals a clear stance on ongoing cultural and social debates that extends well beyond just AI functionality.
And those examples.
And the specific controversial examples cited the Pope, the Founding Fathers, the Vikings, even the nuclear apocalypse scenario, they're all very carefully chosen for their political resonance. They are designed to illustrate a perceived problem to a particular audience and reinforce a narrative about cultural direction within federal operations.
Okay, and finally, regarding its legal standing, could this executive order face constitutional or legal challenges, particularly concerning, say, free speech or viewpoint discrimination?
That's an important question. While the government certainly retains broad discretion in its procurement decisions, it can largely choose what it buys, defining ideological neutrality for AI in a way that effectively suppresses certain viewpoints or promotes others could face First Amendment challenges.
How so?
Courts could potentially view this as compelling speech or as viewpoint discrimination from vendors if it effectively forces AI models to omit or alter information based on a specific ideological preference dictated by the government. Now, the order does include that standard clause stating it does not create any right or benefit enforceable at law.
Right, the disclaimer.
The disclaimer. But its underlying intent to influence content could still be challenged on broader constitutional grounds, particularly concerning freedom of speech and the government's role in shaping the information provided to its citizens. It's definitely a legally contentious area.
Okay. On the same day, July 23rd, 2025, yet another executive order was signed. This one's titled, Promoting the Export of the American AI Technology Stack. This seems to take a much broader global view compared to the domestic focus of the woke AI order we just discussed. What's the stated purpose here, and what does American AI Technology Stack actually mean in this context?
The explicit policy of this order is, quote, to preserve and extend American leadership in AI and decrease international dependence on AI technologies developed by our adversaries.
So competition with rivals.
Exactly. It's framed as a critical component of national security and economic growth, aiming to ensure that American AI technologies, standards, and governance models are adopted worldwide. So it's an overt national security and economic dominance strategy, using AI as a key tool for global competitive advantage.
And the technology stack.
The American AI Technology Stack refers to a comprehensive suite of AI capabilities, everything from the foundational hardware like chips and servers, all the way up to the final applications that users interact with, the whole ecosystem.
Got it. And what about the benefits to the wealthy and large businesses in this one? It sounds like it's designed to directly boost certain sectors and industries internationally.
It absolutely is. The order establishes the American AI Exports Program within the Department of Commerce. And this program will involve industry-led consortia.
Industry-led.
Yes, and these consortia are explicitly required to propose full-stack AI technology packages. That means, again, everything from hardware, data center storage, cloud services, networking, the AI models themselves, and even specific applications for various use cases like healthcare or agriculture.
So comprehensive packages for export.
Exactly. And crucially, Section 4 details the mobilization of federal financing tools. The Economic Diplomacy Action Group, or EDAG, which is essentially the government's economic foreign policy and trade promotion team, is tasked with coordinating the deployment of federal financial instruments specifically in support of these priority AI export packages.
What kind of financial tools?
The list includes direct loans and loan guarantees, equity investments, co-financing, political risk insurance, and credit guarantees, and technical assistance and feasibility studies. So, this is a direct and substantial injection of federal support, both financial and diplomatic, explicitly designed to accelerate the global expansion of major American AI and technology companies.
Right.
It represents a significant, tangible benefit to the tech industry and its investors, providing a clear competitive advantage in the global market. It's not just about creating a favorable environment, it's about actively funding and supporting their international growth and market capture.
So while the immediate benefits are clearly for these large corporations, are there any potential indirect benefits or perhaps harms to regular Americans from this big global push for AI dominance?
Well, the stated purpose does include helping to define the future of economic growth for the U.S. and strengthen relationships with our allies. And this could indirectly lead to some high-tech job creation domestically and potentially bolster national economic strength over time through increased trade and innovation, which, broadly benefits the economy.
But it's indirect.
It's indirect. It's important to note that the immediate and direct beneficiaries are the corporations themselves and their shareholders, not necessarily the average worker or consumer in a direct, measurable way.
And any direct harm.
From the text of the order itself, there's no readily apparent direct harm to regular Americans. It's primarily focused on industrial and geopolitical advantage, which are typically framed as beneficial for the nation as a whole, but the benefits for individuals are certainly diffuse and maybe longer term.
The terminology used, that phrase full stack American AI technology stack, it sounds very deliberate, almost martial. Is there a symbolic or even perhaps a deceptive element to that beyond just its descriptive nature?
It's a very powerful framing, isn't it? Almost militaristic, as you say. It implies a comprehensive, integrated, and self-sufficient approach to global AI dominance, presenting American technology as this complete superior ecosystem ready for export.
Yeah.
And while the order emphasizes benefits to economic growth for the nation as a whole, the primary mechanism, as we discussed, is the direct support and expansion of private corporations. The benefits to the nation are presented as an outcome of supporting these specific large businesses, rather than direct benefits flowing to citizens. It's a way of aligning corporate interests very closely with national interests under a compelling tech-forward banner.
Okay, from the quiet ambition of accelerating technology, we now pivot to an executive order from the next day, July 24, 2025. This one's titled, Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets. This order directly confronts a very visible societal issue. It describes endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks as making our cities unsafe. And it directly links these issues to individuals experiencing homelessness. How does the order frame this problem, and what specific statistics does it cite to support its claims?
The order asserts that the number of individuals living on the streets in the United States recorded at 274,224 on a single night during the last year of the previous administration was, quote, the highest ever recorded.
Okay, that's a specific number.
It then claims that the overwhelming majority of these individuals are addicted to drugs, have a mental health condition, or both. Specifically, it states that nearly 2/3 of homeless individuals report having regularly used hard drugs like methamphetamines, cocaine, or opioids in their lifetimes, and an equally large share of homeless individuals reported suffering from mental health conditions. It concludes the section by saying that tens of billions of dollars have been spent on what it calls failed programs addressing homelessness without tackling its root causes, leaving other citizens vulnerable. And the proposed solution outlined is a significant shift in approach. Quote, shifting homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through the appropriate use of civil commitment will restore public order.
Wow.
It explicitly prioritizes public order, stating that surrendering our cities and citizens to disorder and fear is neither compassionate to the homeless nor other citizens.
That sounds like a very direct and forceful approach to addressing homelessness. The order talks about restoring civil commitment. Can you walk us through what that actually means in practice? What specific changes does it propose to existing legal frameworks, and how might those implications play out for individuals and communities?
Yeah, this section 2, is probably one of the most impactful and potentially controversial parts of the order. It directs the Attorney General to, quote, seek, in appropriate cases, the reversal of federal or state judicial precedents and the termination of consent decrees that impede the policy of encouraging civil commitment.
Reversing court precedents.
That's the directive. Seeking reversal for individuals with mental illness who pose risks to themselves or the public, or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves. It also mandates providing assistance to states and local governments for, this phrase is key, maximally flexible civil commitment, institutional treatment, and step-down treatment standards.
Maximally flexible. What does that imply?
Well, it raises an important question about the fundamental balance between perceived public safety and individual liberty, doesn't it? Especially for a highly vulnerable population. The term maximally flexible could imply significant discretion for authorities,
Yeah.
which could potentially lead to involuntary institutionalization for extended periods, even in the absence of criminal charges. This could significantly impact the dignity and freedom of individuals, compelling them into treatment or institutionalization they may not consent to. It also directs the Attorney General to ensure that federal detainees with serious mental illness are not released back into the public simply due to a lack of forensic bed capacity.
Okay. So beyond civil commitment, the order also talks about fighting vagrancy on America's streets and directs various federal agencies to prioritize discretionary grants based on certain local actions. What specific actions are states and cities being incentivized to take against homelessness and vagrancy, and what could be the consequences for those living on the streets?
Section 3 dictates that federal grants will be prioritized for states and municipalities that actively enforce prohibitions on things like open illicit drug use, urban camping and loitering, and urban squatting.
So tying funding to enforcement.
Directly tying discretionary funding to enforcement. It also explicitly supports encampment removal efforts using federal funds under the Emergency Federal Law Enforcement Assistance Program. Additionally, it requires homeless individuals arrested for federal crimes to be evaluated for sexual dangerousness. So, by linking federal funding to the enforcement of these prohibitions and explicitly supporting encampment removals, the ELO signals a pretty punitive, law enforcement-centric approach.
Rather than social services.
It appears that way, yes. It could lead to the criminalization of homelessness itself, rather than providing direct social services or housing solutions. For individuals living on the streets, this could mean increased arrests, displacement, constant moving, and a further erosion of dignity, simply for existing in public spaces without shelter.
This order also appears to explicitly target certain widely recognized public health approaches to homelessness and addiction, specifically things like harm reduction and housing first policies. Can you elaborate on how the order challenges these strategies and what the implications are for federal funding?
That's right. Section 4 directs HHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, to ensure that grants for substance use disorder do not fund programs that fail to achieve adequate outcomes, including so-called harm reduction or safe consumption efforts that only facilitate illegal drug use and its attendant harm.
So-called harm reduction. That wording is quite pointed.
Very pointed. It's a direct attack on harm reduction strategies, which many public health experts advocate for as a way to reduce overdose deaths, disease transmission, and actually improve engagement with health services. The order clearly states they only facilitate illegal drug use, which, as I said, is a highly contested claim within public health communities.
Right.
It also prioritizes funding for drug courts and mental health courts as an alternative pathway. And then Section 5 goes further, stating that HHS and HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, are to end support for housing-first policies that deprioritize accountability and fail to promote treatment, recovery, and self-sufficiency.
So a direct rejection of housing first.
A direct rejection. This is a significant philosophical shift. Housing First approaches aim to provide stable housing without preconditions, arguing that stability is the necessary foundation for addressing other issues like addiction or mental health.
Right. Get people housed first, then offer services.
That's the model. This order moves to a different model, one that requires recipients of federal housing assistance to increase requirements that participants with substance use disorder or serious mental illness use treatment services as a condition of participation.
So treatment becomes mandatory for housing aid.
Essentially, yes, as a condition. It also directs a review of recipients operating drug injection sites or safe consumption sites for federal law violations and authorizes freezing their assistance. Additionally, HUD is directed to allow federally funded programs to exclusively house women and children and prevent sex offenders from being housed with unrelated children. And the order allows or requires collection of health-related information from recipients and sharing it with law enforcement authorities where permitted by law.
Wow, that's a lot of change.
It represents a significant philosophical shift, moving away from voluntary engagement and stability-first models towards a more coercive model, imposing conditions on assistance and emphasizing forced or mandated treatment. This raises serious concerns about privacy, individual autonomy, and the potential for increased legal actions against service providers, potentially impacting the dignity and self-determination of those seeking help.
So with all these directives aimed at homelessness and public order, are there any direct benefits to the wealthy or specific industries identified within the text of this particular order?
Not directly, no. Unlike the AI infrastructure order, this one doesn't seem to have explicit beneficiaries in the corporate world. However, one could speculate that a significant shift towards institutionalization, if civil commitment rates increase dramatically as the order encourages, could indirectly benefit private treatment centers or perhaps even correctional facilities.
Right, if demand increases.
If the demand for such long-term institutional settings rises, it could certainly create new revenue streams for private providers in that space. But the order itself does not explicitly state this as a direct benefit or a policy goal for any specific industry.
The title Ending Crime and Disorder in the language used really set a strong political tone, don't they?
Yeah.
How much of this order do you think is actual policy implementation and how much is maybe political theater or symbolic messaging?
Well, the entire executive order serves as a very strong political statement. It appeals directly to public safety concerns and a desire for visible order on the streets. It uses that specific, emotionally charged language we talked about, endemic vagrancy, failed programs, surrendering our cities, to frame the problem in a way that resonates politically and justifies a more punitive approach. The direct attacks on harm reduction and housing first policies are also significant. They signal a clear ideological stance on public health and social services, framing those approaches as ineffective or even dangerous, thus positioning the administration as offering a decisive new approach. So, while it definitely lays out concrete policy directives for federal agencies, the very strong rhetoric and the choice of targeted programs serve a significant symbolic and political purpose for the administration as well. It sends a message.
This seems like an order that's, well, ripe for significant legal challenges, especially concerning individual liberties and maybe federal-state relations. What are the potential constitutional or legal issues it might face?
Oh, this order is almost certain to face significant legal challenges, I would imagine. The directives to seek the reversal of federal or state judicial precedents and the termination of consent decrees concerning civil commitment that could directly challenge fundamental due process rights and individual liberties.
I'm messing with court rulings.
It could potentially lead to involuntary detention without adequate judicial review, which is a cornerstone of our legal system. Similarly, conditioning federal funding for states and municipalities on their enforcement of specific vagrancy prohibitions and encampment removals could be challenged under the 10th Amendment.
So?
As an infringement on states' rights, essentially coercing them into adopting certain policies dictated by the federal government.
Federalism concerns.
Exactly. Furthermore, the requirements to collect and potentially share health-related information with law enforcement also raise serious privacy concerns under existing laws like HIPAA, even with that qualifier, where permitted by law. The intent here seems clearly to push the boundaries of existing legal frameworks concerning individual rights, privacy, and the balance of power between federal and state governments. It's practically inviting court battles.
Okay. From the complexities of social order on the streets, we now turn to another executive order from that same day, July 24th, 2025. This one's titled Saving College Sports.
A completely different topic.
Completely different. This one dives into the, well, very contentious world of college athletics. It describes college sports as a uniquely American institution that is under, quote, unprecedented threat due to recent litigation. How does the order frame this perceived threat to the integrity of college sports?
The order asserts that recent court rulings regarding name, image, and likeness, or NIL, compensation, and also player transfers, have created what it calls an out-of-control, rudderless system.
Strong words again.
Yes. It claims this has led to bidding wars for the best players by university donors and collectives, and that this is siphoning away the resources necessary to support the panoply of non-revenue sports, explicitly mentioning women's sports as being potentially harmed.
And does it give examples?
It does. It cites rather dramatic figures to illustrate this point. It says players at some universities are reportedly receiving over $50 million per year, though that seems exceptionally high, and that football players at one unnamed university are projected to be paid $40 million collectively by the 2025 season.
Wow. Big numbers.
Big numbers cited. And the core policy statement of the order is very clear. It is common sense that college sports are not and should not be professional sports. That's the bottom line for this administration.
So with that context, what does this order propose to do about this threat, and how might it impact student athletes and the future of college athletics? Especially for you, our listener, if you're a fan or perhaps involved in college sports in some way.
Okay, Section 2 outlines the key policy directives. First, it focuses on protecting and expanding women's and non-revenue sports.
How does it do that?
It sets specific revenue-based requirements for collegiate athletic departments. Those with over $125 million in annual revenue must provide more scholarship opportunities and maximum roster spots for non-revenue sports than they did previously. Those with over $50 million must provide at least as many as before. And it also states that any revenue-sharing arrangements permitted between universities and collegiate athletes should be designed and implemented in a manner that preserves or expands scholarships and collegiate athletic opportunities in women's and non-revenue sports.
Okay, so on the surface, that aims to ensure the survival and maybe growth of women's sports and those often overlooked athletic programs. That sounds positive for them.
It's framed that way, yes.
But then the order shifts to prohibiting third-party pay-for-play payments, which seems to be the real core of its intervention here. What does that entail, and what does it mean for the economic agency of student athletes, which has been expanding recently?
This is arguably the most crucial and likely most controversial aspect of the order. The EO declares quite forcefully that third-party pay-for-play payments to collegiate athletes are improper and should not be permitted by universities.
Okay, but what about legitimate NIL deals? Endorsements?
It does clarify that. It says this policy does not apply to compensation provided to an athlete for the fair market value that the athlete provides to a third party, such as for a brand endorsement. So true market value endorsements are supposedly okay.
But who defines pay-for-play versus fair market value? That seems tricky.
Extremely tricky, and the order doesn't really define it clearly. But it directs the Secretary of Education, in consultation with the Attorney General, HHS, and the FTC chairman, to develop a plan within 30 days to advance these policies. And how? Through all available and appropriate regulatory, enforcement, and litigation mechanisms.
Wow. All mechanisms.
Including federal funding decisions, enforcement of Title IX, and explicitly prohibiting what it calls unconstitutional actions by states to regulate interstate commerce, likely aimed at state NIL laws. So this is a direct and quite forceful attempt to roll back the economic opportunities for student athletes that have emerged from recent court decisions and state laws.
Putting the genie back in the bottle, essentially.
That seems to be the goal. While it's framed as saving college sports for their educational and developmental benefits, it fundamentally reasserts institutional control over athlete compensation. This could significantly limit the financial freedom and earning potential of incredibly talented young individuals who, let's be honest, generate billions for their institutions.
Right.
This directly impacts the dignity and economic agency of these athletes, and potentially their ability to earn a fair return for their labor in what is undeniably a highly lucrative industry. It's an explicit federal effort to reshape the landscape of college sports away from these recent market-driven shifts.
So the federal government is stepping in very actively, taking a strong legal stance to, in essence, try and reverse the economic empowerment of student athletes that recent court rulings have enabled. What about other legal protections or directives in this area?
Precisely. Section 4 further emphasizes this. It directs the Attorney General and the FTC chair to, quote, stabilize and preserve college athletics through litigation, guidelines, policies, or other actions, specifically by protecting student-athlete rights and scholarship availability when threatened.
Okay.
And this includes, significantly, reviewing and revising existing litigation positions the government might have taken in related cases. The intent is clearly to legally reinforce the amateur model of college sports as envisioned by the administration.
So potentially switching sides in ongoing lawsuits.
Potentially, yes. It sets the stage for future court battles aimed at undoing previous judicial rulings that expanded athlete compensation rights.
What are the benefits to the wealthy or businesses in this order? Especially given its stated goal of reining in player compensation from donors, it seems a bit counterintuitive on the surface.
It does seem counterintuitive at first glance. While the order aims to curtail direct pay-for-play benefits flowing to athletes from wealthy donors or collectives, it ultimately provides significant benefits to the institutions themselves, the universities and the collegiate athletic organizations like the NCAA or conferences.
How so?
By reestablishing their ability to control athlete compensation, it protects the existing business model of college sports, which is, as we know, a massive multi-billion-dollar industry. This model largely relies on maintaining an amateur status for the vast majority of athletes, even as revenue sports like football and men's basketball generate immense profits.
So it keeps labor costs down for the universities.
Essentially, yes. It secures financial stability and control for the institutions and their conferences, rather than allowing significant portions of the revenue to flow directly to the athletes who generate it. It's a way of preserving the traditional economic hierarchy within college sports.
The title Saving College Sports and that narrative of an out-of-control system, they seem to carry a lot of symbolic weight and political messaging, framing this as a kind of crisis.
Absolutely. The title Saving College Sports is highly emotive language, isn't it? It's designed to rally support for a specific traditional vision of collegiate athletics. The narrative portrays the pre-existing system as ideal, and the recent changes driven by litigation and athlete empowerment as a threat and madness that must be stopped. This framing presents the federal intervention as necessary, as rescuing a beloved institution from external forces. And that explicit statement, college sports are not and should not be professional sports, is a strong ideological and politically charged position, especially when you consider the multi-billion-dollar industry that college athletics truly is. It's a clear attempt to define the reality of college sports through executive fiat, aligning with a more traditional view of amateurism.
Given the recent court rulings favoring athletes and just the sheer complexity of athlete compensation now, this executive order seems almost guaranteed to invite significant legal challenges. What do you anticipate on that front?
Oh, it's highly likely to face them, yes. The attempt to prohibit third-party pay-for-play payments, however vaguely defined, could be challenged on antitrust grounds.
Because courts have said those restrictions are anti-competitive.
Exactly. Courts have largely found such restrictions to be anti-competitive in the past, and this order appears to push back directly against that judicial precedent. Furthermore, federal intervention into areas traditionally governed by states, like state NIL laws, or by private organizations like the NCAA, well, that could raise serious questions about federal overreach and states' rights.
Right.
And the order's directive to the Attorney General to review and, as necessary, revise litigation positions implies a clear willingness to actively engage in legal battles to achieve its goals, potentially trying to undo the effects of prior judicial rulings that favored athlete rights. This could lead to prolonged legal uncertainty for the entire collegiate sports landscape, impacting the ability of student athletes to pursue their education and athletic careers with any clear economic understanding. It's potentially very disruptive.
Okay, let's shift gears now to a different type of presidential action. Proclamations. These are often more symbolic than direct policy, but they still carry weight as statements of national values. Our first one from July 25, 2025 is Captive Nations Week 2025. This has a long history, doesn't it? Dating back to 1959.
It does, yes. Captive Nations Week dates back to 1959 when President Dwight D. Eisenhower first proclaimed it. Its original purpose during the Cold War was to counter the emerging threat of communism and declare America's resolve to defend fundamental rights for those living under oppressive regimes.
And the current purpose.
The current proclamation reaffirms a commitment to, quote, advancing a new era of peace where freedom is cherished, sovereignty is respected, and every nation can live without fear of tyranny or oppression. It explicitly states heartfelt support to every person living under a totalitarian regime.
What are the key themes and the sort of rhetoric used in this year's proclamation? It seems to emphasize specific values pretty strongly.
It does. The proclamation places a very strong emphasis on defending religious freedom. It explicitly mentions the Religious Liberty Commission, the White House Faith Office, and the State Department's Office of International Religious Freedom working together on this front.
Okay.
It also states a core belief very directly: our rights do not come from government, but from God in heaven. And it further declares that America stands with all people who resist tyranny, defend their faith, and fight for the God-given rights of every human being. This really anchors the proclamation in a specific values-based framework that definitely resonates with the particular segment of the population.
So for regular Americans listening, is this more about symbolic support, or does it have any direct, tangible impacts on daily life?
This proclamation is primarily a symbolic gesture. It expresses support for universal human rights and democratic values globally, and it reinforces these values domestically. It serves as an annual reminder of certain American ideals and solidarity with those perceived as oppressed.
So no policy changes attached.
No, it does not implement new policies, it doesn't allocate funds, and it doesn't directly benefit specific businesses or the wealthy. Its impact is purely rhetorical and declarative, aimed at reaffirming a national stance. And importantly, since it's based on a joint resolution of Congress from way back in 1959, there are no direct constitutional concerns or really any deceptive wording to highlight in the proclamation itself. It is what it is, a statement of values.
Okay. Our final document today is another proclamation from that same day, July 25th, 2025. This one's titled Made in America Week 2025. This clearly focuses on, well, economic patriotism and national industry. What's the stated purpose here, and what narrative does it present about America's economic past and future?
The stated purpose of Made in America Week is to, quote, recommit to furthering this legacy of American building, creating, and innovating, and also to embolden our workers, re-energize our industries, and bring back those beautiful words, made in the USA.
Okay, standard patriotic theme.
Yes, but the proclamation presents a specific narrative alongside it. It says that while the U.S. was once a hub of manufacturing, over the decades, a globalist ruling class closed our factories, shipped away our jobs, and stripped our families. They hollowed out America as they built up China, and American citizens suffered as a result.
Globalist ruling class. That's very specific political framing.
Very specific, yes. It's designed to resonate with a particular base, positioning the current administration as actively reversing this trend it describes.
So even though it's a proclamation, which, as you said, is often symbolic, does this one reference any concrete actions that actually benefit businesses or maybe the wealthy?
It absolutely does. While a proclamation is largely symbolic in itself, this one explicitly references specific legislative and executive actions that are quite tangible and have real financial implications.
Like,
It mentions the previously signed executive order that created the United States Investment Accelerator. That's an office within the Department of Commerce, tasked with facilitating investments greater than $1 billion in America. It also refers to a presidential memorandum designed to bolster foreign investment while defending national security interests. And crucially, it highlights the enactment of the, quote, historic One Big Beautiful Bill earlier that month.
One Big Beautiful Bill. Is that its actual name?
Chuckles slightly. No, that's clearly a political descriptor, not the neutral legislative title. But this bill, according to the proclamation, delivered an interest deduction for loans on new American-made vehicles, and significantly, 100% expensing for new factories, equipment, and machinery.
100% expensing. That's a big tax benefit for businesses investing heavily.
A very significant tax benefit, yes. It also mentions directing the FTC to crack down on sellers who falsely claim their products are made in the USA. So while the proclamation itself is a celebration and a statement of intent, it explicitly ties itself to concrete legislative and executive actions that directly provide significant benefits to large manufacturers, industries, and investors through substantial tax incentives and streamlined investment processes. It's clearly designed to spur corporate activity and investment on American shores.
And what are the potential impacts on regular Americans, according to the proclamation's narrative? How are they supposed to benefit?
The stated benefits to regular Americans are largely tied to that rhetoric of reclaiming American sovereignty, bringing back jobs, and boosting domestic production.
Okay.
The tax deduction for loans on new American-made vehicles could benefit consumers who purchase them, though realistically, primarily those with the means to buy new cars in the first place.
Good.
The proclamation also makes a significant assertion about jobs, claiming that American-born workers account for all of the job gains since I took office for 4 months straight.
That's a strong claim.
It's a very strong claim. From the text of the proclamation itself, there's no readily apparent direct harm mentioned for regular Americans. It focuses entirely on the positive economic outcomes it aims to foster.
And any constitutional issues or deceptive wording here?
Not with the proclamation itself, as it's largely celebratory. However, those claims about job gains and the effects of the one big, beautiful bill are presented as direct results. A full understanding of their accuracy and causality would likely require more context and independent economic analysis than the proclamation provides. It's presenting a very specific, positive interpretation of economic data. #tag outro.
So after digging into all of that, what does this all mean for you, our listener? We've certainly seen a fascinating range of presidential actions this past week, haven't we?
We have.
From these highly detailed executive orders aimed at fundamentally reshaping how major industries operate or how social challenges are approached, all the way to these proclamations that reinforce specific national values and economic narratives.
And across these documents, I think a clear pattern does emerge. There's a pronounced prioritization of large-scale industrial and technological development, frequently accompanied by significant financial and regulatory support for, well, big businesses.
Right, the AI orders especially.
Exactly. And simultaneously, there's a strong emphasis on reasserting governmental control over complex social issues, homelessness, college sports, often by rolling back previous approaches or challenging legal precedents. And that can have profound and often complex impacts on individual liberties, on personal dignity, and certainly on vulnerable populations. We saw potential shifts in environmental oversight, significant changes in how society approaches homelessness and mental health, and also real questions about the economic freedom of student athletes.
It's so vital to remember, isn't it, that these aren't just abstract policies being debated somewhere far away in Washington. They directly impact everything from potentially your local environment and your personal freedoms to the types of jobs available in your community, and even the future of institutions like college sports that many of us care deeply about.
Yeah.
Understanding the details beyond the headlines is just critical to seeing how these decisions ripple out into your daily life.
Absolutely. And this collection of actions really highlights that constant tension in governance, doesn't it? The balance between economic growth and environmental protection, between public order and individual autonomy. And government's role, fundamentally, in shaping cultural and social norms.
Yeah.
In a world just awash with information, critical thinking isn't just useful, it's essential, especially when you're trying to discern the true intent from the actual effect of these kinds of directives. It pushes you, the listener, to ask who truly benefits from this, and perhaps more importantly, at what cost.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe consider this provocative thought for yourself. How will this explicit push for rapid and efficient build-out of new industries, especially when coupled with a governmental attempt to redefine truth in AI? How will that shape the very fabric of American society in the coming years? And will the attempt to restore public order by fundamentally altering approaches to homelessness, or the effort to save college sports by rolling back athlete empowerment? Will those actions truly solve complex problems? Or might they inadvertently create new challenges for fundamental rights and freedoms, or maybe for the causes of healthcare, education, or basic dignity for all?
It raises a really important question for you to mull over, I think. What kind of future are these executive actions building for your community? And how might you assess their long-term consequences, looking beyond just their immediate promises or their often very appealing headlines?